So the last few years, when people talk about China's property crisis, they usually start with companies like Evergrande or Country Garden. But I think the more important name right now is Vanke or Vanke, because if Vanke ends up here, it tells you very it tells you something very different about where the cycle really is, right? So let's start with what actually happened. So Vanke actually recently tried to negotiate a delay on an onshore bond repayment. Not an enormous amount in absolute terms, but symbolically, it's a very big deal. Long story short, bondholders don't agree. And that matters because Vanke has always been seen as this good student of China's property sector. Not the most aggressive, not the most leveraged, relatively disciplined historically, relatively conservative. For years, the assumption was if anyone can make it through the cycle, through this long property downturn, it has to be Vanke. So when even Vanke was talking about debt extensions, there's no longer about a few badly run developers. This is very systemic. But Vanke is not just a company, it's also a political story. To understand that, you have to go back to 10 years ago in 2016 and 2015 in the famous Vanke Baonen equity battle. So back then, there was this insurance company, a very young and new but massive insurance company called Baonen. It used high leverage to try to buy up Vanke's shares and attempted a hostile takeover. And it turned into a very public fight between Vanke's management and this insurance company. So the management, they resisted to the point that even regulators stepped in and tried to settle the dispute. Eventually, Shenzhen Metro, which is a Shenzhen local state-owned company, stepped in and became Vanke's largest shareholder. It was a real turning point in Vanke's fate. And here is an interesting detail people often forget. At the time, the top political leader in Shenzhen was Mr. Ma Xingrui. Ma later went on to become a Politburo member and party secretary of Xinjiang, so very high level official now. But during the Vanke Baonen episode, he was right at the center of Shenzhen's political system. Now, fast forward to today, Vanke is under serious financial stress. At the same time, the anti-corruption campaign is reaching back into Shenzhen's own political establishment. Yesterday, Dai Beifang, a long-term senior Shenzhen official and former chairman of Shenzhen's political consultation conference, which is basically something like the upper house of Shenzhen, was investigated. And then there is Ma Xingrui. To be very clear, there's no official announcement that Ma is under any investigation. He missed several very important meetings. He was not seen when he should be. And his name didn't appear where it should be. But still, there's no official announcement yet. So we don't know really exactly what happened to him. We also don't know exactly why he's in trouble, if he is. So everything I'm about to say today is speculation, okay? Pure speculation. But in China, patterns matter. It's hard to have pure coincidence. So the Vanke Baonen battle was a moment when finance, real estate, and politics were tightly intertwined. Decisions were made to stabilize Vanke, stabilize Shenzhen, and stabilize the system. a decade ago. Now, nearly a decade later, China seems to be closing that chapter. If senior figures associated with that era are being examined, and if all political guarantees are quietly being withdrawn, then Vanke's current difficulties don't look entirely accidental, right? So it starts to look like some kind of a reckoning for the China's real estate sector. It's not just for a company, but for a whole historical period. And this helps me to bring to this final point I want to make, where I actually disagree with a lot of commentary. Okay, so people keep saying that if even Vanke runs into trouble, then confidence will collapse, and so on and so forth. I don't think that's quite right. In fact, one could argue that resolving Vanke's, or whatever resolution ultimately looks like, may actually mark a turning point. As long as Vanke's fate is unclear, the market stays in limbo of some sorts. Everyone keeps asking, who is really safe? What does state support actually mean? Once this last symbol of the old property model is dealt with, financially and politically, the system can finally move forward. So maybe this isn't the start of something worse. Maybe this is the end of the beginning. Thank you for listening. This is China Translated, where I help to make China makes more sense to you. If you're interested, please subscribe. You can also find my content on China Translated newsletter. Just Google China Translated